Most of you probably already know what Pizza Tower is all about, but for those who don't, here's a quick rundown. Pizza Tower is like if Mario owned an Italian restaurant which Pete Zauser threatened to nuke, only for Mario to completely fly off the hinges, turn that M into Wumbo mode, and become the greatest spiritual successor to his arch-nemesis' game series, one which I hold dear to my heart, and one which has been dead as a doorknob for the better part of 2 decades. So as a latecomer to a series I thought I'd never get to experience again, it is with great reverence that I present to you something even better. In case you didn't parse my semi-cryptic introduction, Pizza Tower draws heavy inspiration from the Wario Land games. No, not the ones with the glorified mobile games, the ones which still had soul. It's basically a modern interpretation of what Wario Land would be like in the modern gaming landscape, while keeping and expanding upon the features which gave those games their identity. You've got unique transformations, that characteristic greed for money, or in Pizza Tower's case, score, and what has to be one of my personal favourite game mechanics ever, the escape sequence. And these are all topics which I'd love to gush about ad infinitum starting now, but unfortunately it seems I should instead acquaint you with the basics first. You play as the canonically named Peppino Spaghetti, an eldritch horror of a man so terrifying that even the concept of physics dares not hold him to its most basic whims. Your main objective in Pizza Tower is to run through levels collecting toppings, looking for treasure, and wreaking havoc amongst the general populace. This all culminates at the end of the level when you break John the Pillar, initiate the escape sequence, and frantically bolt back to the exit door before Pizza Face stirs from his slumber. Now that you have a good understanding of why it's necessary to go fast, we can finally talk about, well, going fast. Speed is the most important thing in Pizza Tower, and you're going to like it whether you like it or not. During the escape, and even beforehand if you're good enough, you'll be reaching speeds so ludicrous that it becomes almost impossible to react to what's coming ahead of you. This is a common problem faced by a lot of incredibly fast-paced 2D platformers, and there's been numerous attempts to alleviate said issue. These include zooming out the camera at the cost of losing some finer movement, to panning the camera ahead of the player, to designing more intuitive levels with signals about what's coming up next. Pizza Tower does an amazing job at circumventing this problem almost entirely, because the fastest part of the game, the escape, has you traversing rooms you've already seen, but backwards. This distinction is important because the player actually does know what's coming ahead of them, as they've already seen these rooms before the escape. The initial slower part of each level, spent more methodically searching each room for collectibles and secrets, actually plays perfectly into this frantic dash to the exit, because it gives the player time to fully memorize and internalize each screen in the level without even realizing they're doing anything important. This makes the escape all the better, letting you feel like a golden god for successfully dealing with each obstacle the game throws at you. Even small slip-ups don't matter that much, as you can regain your speed quite quickly and get back to that high of blazing through everything you see. This isn't even the only thing Pizza Tower does well to keep you in that fast-moving flow state. Each escape is kept interesting by having you take a vastly different path through the level than your first time through. New areas open up, and your previous pathways get blocked off, so obviously you can't rely on knowing the layout of a room you've never seen before. But here's where Pizza Tower shows the extra tricks up its sleeve. Not only is it amazing about signaling upcoming obstacles, but it also never throws any cheap curveballs at you. It'll consistently use collectibles like a Mario Maker coin trail in order to guide you on where to jump, when to jump, and even which side of a wall you're supposed to run up. There's even escape-only time collectibles to make sure you don't accidentally pick up your future guide as you do your initial run-through. The difference between these trails and Mario Makers is that you never get a situation where Pizza Tower tries to fool you. There's no coin trails which lead into bottomless pits. Pizza Tower wants you to succeed. It wants you to go fast and to have fun. This trust is established early and never broken, which makes it significantly easier to react to where you're supposed to go, even when Peppino's running it down at Mach 4. This fundamental idea of not needing the player to question too many things at once is echoed in yet another benefit of Pizza Tower's tempo. Not only does carrying Peppino's massive momentum through screen after screen feel amazing and help you rack up score, but it also provides a tangible gameplay boon, that being the ability to completely ignore enemies. Going fast enough will cause enemies to be frightened of Peppino, and honestly, who wouldn't be? They'll drop their weapons even if they were originally pointed towards Peppino and would have stopped him. Even the incorporeal ghosts of Pizza Scare, who are markedly completely immune to Peppino's attacks under normal circumstances, will drop their knives in terror when approached at Italian-flavoured light speed. This means that when you reach that speed where obstacles start becoming unreactable, you simultaneously have to consider significantly less stimulus, as enemies may as well not exist anymore. This results in that reactable line being pushed back to where it is reasonable to see what's coming ahead of you and problem solve on the fly, as the only thing left to worry about is level geometry. And this is taught quite naturally to the player, as you're inevitably going to end up running into an enemy you didn't notice due to your rapid pace. This all comes to a crescendo to make Peppino's celerity feel as immaculate as possible. Even at the worst of times, it never feels like the game did you dirty. Whenever I dramatically failed, it never felt like it was the game's fault. It was always a me issue. And I'm a serial complainer, so if there was any way to shift the blame away from myself, you know I'd be taking it. At the best of times, Peppino chugging a Swiftness 15 potion and blasting off like a rocket ship makes you feel completely invincible. Of course, it helps that, outside of bosses, Peppino is actually invincible, paying homage to its Wario Land roots. But it works, because even though there's no hard fail state other than running the clock down during the escape, there's still stakes and consequences for getting hit, those being the obvious speed loss, but also the reduction in score and potential loss of your combo. It's not like these are points for the sake of points either. At the end of each level, you'll be ranked on a scale from Dawful to Spurfect. The system works similarly to Ultra Kill, where the better you play, the higher you rank. It's even possible to get an elusive P rank if you complete a stage to absolute perfection. This includes completing every secret, finding the treasure, and the ridiculous task of never dropping your combo. Which is insane, because if you go 3 seconds flat without gaining score, or god forbid, get hit, you can kiss your combo goodbye. Each of these elements makes it imperative to plan a route around each level when going for P, and I realize that sounds kind of boring when saying it aloud, but it's part of the game that I really enjoyed. There's a lot of room for creativity and expression in your route. Do you leave a secret behind for the escape when it's easier to access? Where are your super taunts best used? Even minute details like how and when you choose to extend your combo can impact how easy it is to P rank a certain level. I'm not super knowledgeable on this, but these seem like more palatable versions of things you'd have to consider for routing a speedrun. So as someone who's never really cared for speedrunning, the fact that Pizza Tower drew me in and enamored me to the point where I P ranked every level is astounding. But there's one more prerequisite to getting a P rank that I haven't mentioned yet, that being completing the second lap. For a game which so obviously wants you to play its levels multiple times over to master them, having the added fun challenge of doing the escape literally twice is so welcome. All those generous timers you saw on your first venture through the level, this was the reason for their seeming generosity. It is with great frequency that my P rank attempts reached a stage where there were single digits worth of seconds remaining, which only added to the heart-pumping, adrenaline-inducing feeling of getting that god run after an hour of practice, and clutching those runs out was nothing short of an endorphin explosion. I've mentioned secrets a few times now, but never found the space to properly explain them. They're basically just mini challenge rooms hidden in each level. They usually play off a specific stage's mechanics or gimmicks, and in some really innovative ways as well. They push the bounds of what is and isn't possible with each mechanic, so they're always a treat to find as a result. It really feels like the devs had a ton of cool ideas they couldn't fit elsewhere, but were too good to leave out entirely. Not once did a secret feel forced, like it was only there for the sake of being a secret. Okay, I can't hold myself back any longer. I need to talk about the movement. Peppino has, quite frankly, a gigantic set of movement options, which can be daunting at times, but somehow it all flows together so beautifully and succinctly. When you get your rhythm going, this game controls like smooth butter. Usually, there's a somewhat conscious understanding between your brain and hands that the former comes up with the ideas and the latter executes them, but Peppino felt so flawless to control that I'm only 50% convinced that I haven't been secretly implanted with a Pizza Tower branded neurochip. Peppino's most important moves are his Mach Run for speed, Wall Run for vertical speed, Dash Grab for building up speed, and Dive to maintain speed. Oh yeah, and he has a jump, which is probably important for this platforming game. Every option in Peppino's kit has its uses, even some of the ones which look less than important at first glance. Personally, I severely underrated the dive, thinking it to only be useful in the most niche of scenarios, only to later learn that I was wrong on so many levels they had to invent new numbers to properly express how wrong I was. You can use dive to great effect as early as the first level in the game to steamroll the last few screens of John Gutter. It's incredibly important for preserving speed when going downwards, as in a lot of cases, you'd otherwise hit a wall and automatically start running up it, aka in the wrong direction. So yeah, I'll give that one up. Dive feels as fundamentally important as wall running itself to put in perspective just how salient an option it is. Bloodsauce Dungeon is an excellent example of how important speed conservation when changing directions can be. Peppino will perform a large skid along the ground before changing direction, which allows you to both take in your surroundings and drop off platforms while altering your orientation. 1-4 teaches this excellently while also providing one of the best vertical escape sequences in the entire game, challenging you to constantly wall run, jump, dive through small gaps, and even asking you when to abort certain walls. These screens will be really clunky at first, but once mastered, the feeling of conquering them so effortlessly is unparalleled. Also, I want to mention that this level has dark screens reminiscent of some of the levels found in Donkey Kong Country games, which look gorgeous by the way, so clearly Wario Land is not the only platformer they're drawing inspiration from. I think it's important to recognize how much leniency is given to the player for slightly mistiming a jump, specifically up a wall. If you're just a bit too low, Peppino will just drag himself up the edge and keep going as if nothing happened. I don't even think you lose speed, and if you do, it's negligent. This synergizes really well with how wall running works. Maybe that's even what I'm noticing, just a small offshoot of the wall run system. Either way, it makes the game so much better in terms of ease of speed, as it turns a lot of scenarios from when or how high do I jump to do I jump, which is pretty vital. The less crucial decisions you need to make while going fast, the better. Having talked about how polished the game's movement is, I also have to praise how easy it is to actually access that movement. The game controls surprisingly well on a keyboard. Platformers are usually the quintessential please play it on a controller type games, because the majority feel 100 times better on controller, be it the layout, the sticks being analog, whatever. There are a few exceptions which feel just as good on keyboard, like Celeste, but these are usually due to a much smaller moveset. Celeste only has to account for jumping, climbing, and dashing. The 4 arrow keys are also completely reasonable to cover every angle of dash you need. What I'm trying to say here is that Pizza Tower is very impressive for having such a comparatively gigantic variant of moves, and yet still controls so well on keyboard. One last thing that I have to cover is that I am still consistently blown away by the game's movement whenever I boot it up to play again. That's a hallmark of an excellent game, when I think I've had time to digest and fully comprehend Pizza Tower's movement, but the fact that I keep being impressed even further goes to show just how sumptuous it really is. Although I could talk about Pizza Tower's godlike movement forever, it would be remiss of me to not mention some of the excellent level-specific mechanics the game throws at you. In this level, the mechanic we will not be talking about is ice physics, because there aren't any. Thank God someone finally realized they can make an ice-themed level without making the controls intentionally horrible. Instead, this is a mechanic which is intended to empower the player. Neat concept, that. About halfway through the level, you find a spicy pizza slice labeled Satan's Choice, which, given your snowy surroundings, just emanates anticipation. It delivers on its promises and then some, not only making you completely invincible against Santa's entire platoon of snowmen, but also giving you this little thing called complete aerial control in this platformer. The feeling of absolute and overwhelming power in the face of gaming's most unanimously hated level theme is nothing short of pristine. It's a complete 180 from the ice levels of old, emboldening the player's moveset instead of stripping away its most basic functionality. This, combined with the fact that you have to complete lap 2 without your newfound superpowers, ensuring that you get a balanced diet of both challenge and power trip, makes, this level one of my favorites. There's a similar feeling of empowerment in Don't Make a Sound. This level is one huge reference to one of the most famous pieces of pizza-related media ever, FNAF. It even comes equipped with really spooky jump scares, ooh. And just like the end of FNAF, Peppino grabs a shotgun and realizes the only thing they fear is him. Seriously though, in order to P-rank this level safely, you have to proceed forward so slowly, making sure to assassinate each and every enemy one by one so as to not alert the animatronics. So I speak no lie when I say the catharsis of ripping and tearing your way through the whole thing during the escape was like nothing I've ever felt. I sincerely thought I was getting Katana Zero'd when I saw the gun, but I am so glad that it was real. Next, I want to talk about the mini-golf level. Yep, that exists, and to swiftly dispel any presumptions, the analytical cap has been hung up on the highest point of the rack, after having been paper shredded. I have no idea why I like this level. All the bones in my body are screaming that there's no way I do, and instead I've been done in by some devilish trickery, perhaps a malignant spell. But in the bottom of my heart, there lies an unmistakable and inexorable feeling that this level was good. It was my most feared level to P-rank, but somewhere along that journey, something clicked. Or maybe broke, I am not sure. These psychopath devs made a mini-golf level fun. I have so many thoughts, but no words with which to speak them. You might need to get your magnifying glasses out for the last mechanic I want to discuss because, yep, that's a whole second character. Gustavo and Brick come out of absolutely nowhere, and control completely differently from Peppino. I'm amazed the devs were able to make what is basically a whole new moveset which feels almost as good as Peppino's, especially considering they only show up for 2 levels. Gustavo and Brick have a considerably more weighty feel than Peppino, and mainly differ due to this fact. They possess a double jump at the cost of significantly more lag when landing, and a much stickier feeling wall jump compared to Peppino's fluid wall run. Big props to the Rayman-inspired twirl attack though. This weightiness is compounded upon in their second and last playable appearance in Pig City, where, due to the level's more open nature compared to that of Gnome Forest, you'll find Gustavo and Brick interacting with the same gimmicks Peppino does, but in entirely new ways. The duo syncs slowly with a rat balloon compared to Peppino's gentle ascent, and Gustavo goes full monkey mode and just climbs the grind rails as Brick floats there omnisciently reading his newspaper. If Peppino is analogous to a freight train who's graduated above the need of train tracks, then Gustavo and Brick are a tank with wings. You even get to see this pair gradually form their friendship throughout each hub world. First, Gustavo is desperately running away, being pursued by the ever-persistent Brick, before learning to fight back one hub later. They then bond over their mutual newfound respect for each other while incapacitated and bandage-clad, before being playable later in that world. They can even be seen in the last world's hub, terrified of the creepy atmosphere. That is, until Peppino comes along. Then they play it cool, which is just so cute. Okay, I have to address the elephant in the room sooner or later. It's the art style. You've probably noticed it already, I mean, it's pretty out there, and I understand if that's off-putting to some people. It might even be a deal breaker, which is really unfortunate because everything else about Pizza Tower is absolute fire, maybe even including the art style if it makes you want to set your eyes ablaze. If you can look past the MS Paint approach, then I implore you give Pizza Tower a shot. It's incredibly worth it. You may even come around to the art, and although I'm probably in the minority, I personally really like it. It's charming and expressive, goofy even, but most of all, I can see and appreciate the functionality it adds to the game. Every action is so fluid, Peppino's moveset is so large, yet everything has a clear, obvious animation due to the distinct art style. That extends to levels and enemies too. Everything is exceptionally clear to read, nothing is left to ambiguity. It must be said that the art must have been easier to make than most other games, which probably helps a lot in it actually coming out and existing. This is also probably why everything feels so smooth, rather than having numerically fewer, more visually pleasing frames of animation which could feel clunky or unpolished in gameplay. You instead get about 1 million in-between frames and tons of expressive squash and stretch to aid readability, which is important to clarify what's even happening on screen to the player while they're flying across it at 0.9 of light speed. This style comes at the cost of being incredibly divisive. I've seen people say they couldn't play Pizza Tower regardless of how good the gameplay was, solely because the art style is nigh and repulsive to them. And it's fine to think that way, I just personally don't agree with the sentiment. While I'm on the topic, a few of my favourite, most humorous examples of this style include these cows in Oregano Desert, which are just stationary JPEGs, the rocking racehorses in Fast Food Saloon, who are so unimaginably smug when they win, and the purest embodiment of salt when they lose. Pineapples which are so cool, they taunt with you, despite literally being enemies. And just all of Peppino's idle animations. They really sell the chaotic and nervous energy he exudes, as does the TV in the top right. Seriously, it's almost hypnotizing watching this thing when you're not in an active pizza-based war zone. In fact, the MS Paintification of Pizza Tower lends itself perfectly to the game's raucous humor. From Dr. Gustavo to your frozen comrades pointing you towards the exit in refrigerator, freezerator. The game barely lets you catch your breath after all the intense gameplay because you'll be too busy wheezing at the next absurd line out of Pizza Granny's mouth. The sinister undertones of the inherently backwards tip, which urges you to keep playing, as your time here is limited, has the same vibe as the downright baleful "you've hurt Peppino 10 times" message, which straight up scares you into playing better. Pepperman's artisan depiction of the eldritch Peppino could pass as a particularly artistic, religious rendition of Satan himself, and for his neutral special, the noise wields a gun. Even the follow-through on each joke is immaculate, the taxi gimmick of Pig City just kept on giving. The original execution was already uncanny enough, but it still goes through 3 progressively wackier transformations, from breaking the very rules the game set for itself to propel Peppino to prison, to the nonchalance of Gustavo as Brick, who shouldn't be able to drive on account of being a rat, drives the taxi effortlessly, all the way to the goddamn villainous pizza face of Pizza Tower fame, being the one to pilot Peppino back to the pigs during the escape. All of this is enhanced so much by the slapstick style combined with the game never taking itself too seriously. In the World 4 hub, Granny Pizza says, "Do you seriously think I'm gonna give you more advice after that blunder you just did?" And I've never been more psychologically mind-gamed by a frickin' NPC before. I felt legitimately embarrassed. Realistically, I know this line will appear no matter what, but I still felt so called out. And they disappear after you speak to them once, just poof! And I was so excited to go see what they had to say after getting a P rank, but I still didn't get the last laugh. I couldn't find anywhere else to say this, but Pizza Tower's OST slaps so hard. Just banger after banger, no misses! Oregano Desert was the first time I really noticed how good it is, and there's even a ton of extra stuff that extends beyond just ear listen brain like. The tutorial theme is one massive reference to the fittingly on-brand pizza theme from the Spider-Man 2 game, and Fast Food Saloon's theme uses a Jet Set Radio sample of all things, which sent me into orbit the first time I heard it. When I first played Pizza Tower, I was a tad surprised to learn that this game has bosses. I guess it didn't really feel like the type of game which needed bosses, but they're a welcome addition nonetheless. Pepperman serves as a good introduction to make sure the player actually understands how to control Peppino, and it also taught me that holding Mach Run down all the time is very stupid. It was a good feeling to learn the fight on his first health bar and then flex my newfound knowledge on his second, which is a trend that all the bosses in this game follow. Of course, the introduction of the extra element in health bar 2 keeps each fight interesting. I have similarly good things to say about the Vigilante, who begins the duel in a Meta Knight-esque style, by offering Peppino a pistol to make things fair. And for how many hours I have logged in roguelike bullet hells, I was thoroughly impressed by the ideas this fight had to offer. Health bar 2 has the whole arena go dark, so atmospheric, perfectly Wild West, even down to that final prepare to draw, which although basically serves as a victory lap, is still super hype. The noise is a troll fight. The fake Peppino boss is exceedingly uncanny and ridiculous, which is a good thing. I think they really pulled off the feeling of fighting an eldritch demon such as Peppino. It kind of feels like the natural progression to the Pepperman fight, but maybe that's just how bosses in this game feel. They're all quite similar other than the Vigilante. Fake Peppino uses all your own moves against you, but even more exaggerated, which I didn't realize was possible. He grabs, he wall runs so hard that even the ceiling is no match for him, he super jumps, etc. It feels like a legitimate feverish nightmare version of yourself, which knowing Peppino Prime is terrifying. This escalates even further after you chew through his 2 health bars. The escape sequence, while quite easy, really does stack on the pressure. The last thing I was prepared for during a boss fight was a sudden burst of precision platforming, but looking back on it, maybe that was naive. It is a platformer after all. The escape accentuated all of the excellent things about the movement system. It was incredible to just be able to run for once. No turns, no obstacles but the formation of the tunnel. This part also highlights how important diving is. Without it, you're going to lose speed a lot more often via crashing into overhangs. My first S rank in Pizza Tower came when I first fought Fake Peppino, and I actually popped off when I got it. It was the perfect combination of unexpected and exhilarating, which I find not many games can induce anymore. Yet against all my expectations, Pizza Tower got me that invested. Hold on, wrong game. Pizza Tower is like a fun black hole, not because it forcefully sucks all the fun out of its neighboring star systems, but because it's a point in space so densely packed with fun that once exposed to it, you can do nothing more than submit to your eventual spaghettification. This was what I learned when playing War. I don't know how I didn't see this level coming. It's based off the most memorable level from Wario Land 4, which begins by immediately starting the escape timer. Only in War, the countdown is a bomb strapped to your chest. It doesn't even stop during secrets like usual, which combined with the secrets flaunting themselves out in the open for once, makes going for them a real risk-reward decision. Same goes for other side objectives like Toppins or the treasure. It's the only level I immediately went back and replayed after beating, and despite knowing the layout and playing decently well, the timer still dipped into single-digit seconds remaining at multiple points. The terminal gimmick kept the tension at such a high. On your initial run, you never know when you're going to bump into the next one of these and get that precious extra time. This thrilling feeling, along with the outstanding level design allowing for some of the fastest sections in the game, is what pushes War over its competitors and crowns it as my absolute favorite level in the game. Also, banishing these stupid rats into the fictitious realm of non-existence like those fat Koopas from Superstar Saga with the enemy's own missiles was so cathartic, although I admit that one was a bit personal. Ultimately, we reach the final boss of Pizza Tower, and it's so damn extraordinary. There's an ominous lead-up, with humor still sprinkled in, an initial easy phase reminiscent of Bowser from Super Mario World before the grand reveal that the enemy you've been fighting this whole time was not a mere pizza face, but a whole pizza man! Pizza Head is Peppino's mirror image in some regards, and antithesis in others. He's ridiculous and chaotic, but with a demeanor completely unbefitting of our favorite Italian pizza chef. This fight is the perfect encapsulation of 2 unstoppable forces colliding head-on, and my ears have never been more convinced that the fabric of the world was being torn asunder than when I listened to Unexpectancy Part 2 for the first time. An exceedingly cool detail in this phase is that Pizza Head tries to unearth the swords from Pizzascape from their stone, but is judged unworthy and ends up pulling up half the level in his attempt. There was a point in time where I was considering if Pizza Tower would have been better off without its bosses. Only the Vigilante really felt like they had a strong reason to be fought, that being the unique gun mechanic. That was until Pizza Tower pulled off the single best boss rush I've ever seen. Upon Pizza Head's seeming defeat, he throws all of Peppino's previous adversaries at him, and it appears Peppino hates boss rushes just as much as the average player having to slug through one, as he goes completely off the rails and is fueled by pure 100% concentrated fury for the rest of the fight, obliterating health bars left, right, and center. The additional mechanic of giving Peppino a Gustavo-shaped missile it's just Gustavo, to hurl at and stun anything that moves is so excellent, and I don't think enough people appreciate Gustavo the Goat for going through such concussion-inducing head injuries solely for Peppino's sake. The boss rush alone is ample justification for including bosses at all. To put into perspective just how insane this fight was, I legitimately had to write, in my notes, "Okay, collect yourself," as I was recounting what happened. At the end of the day, not even Pizza Head can hold a candle to Peppino's unbridled rage, and after numerous perfectly executed one-frame links, he goes down. Literally. One thing that Pizza Tower excels at is getting the player to activate the escape sequence almost on accident. You'll be presented with a really fast, schmoovy room, only for John the Pillar to appear at the end, and be on your screen for 5 whole frames before you inevitably collide with him and begin the escape. This usually adds to the sense of urgency, as you won't be ready to abscond with your treasure, you're just kind of thrust into it. This is not true for the crumbling tower of pizza. You come face to face with John the Pillar one final time. You're taking the tower down on your own terms this time. A final escape through the tower itself was obvious. That does not make it any less hype. Using all the mechanics from the previous levels to aid your escape, collecting friends along the way, the sheer pace of it all, so sublime. The very last section was so fast that my eyes could barely keep up with it. A glorious culmination of everything which came before it. You had to play golf for crying out loud. Also, of course there's 2 finales, the final boss and the final escape. It just makes sense. But whereas usually the boss comes later in any given world, the final boss was first, then the escape. Because the game's strength was the platforming, the speed, the mechanics, not the bosses. They were strong for sure, that final boss was amazing, but the game ends with its strongest face, and I couldn't be happier for it. You're given Peppino's final evaluation after the game's credits, which is hilarious. It's like he's judging you, the player, on how well you handled and made use of his forbidden power. He's an eldritch pizza-loving abomination, I tell you. So taking some inspiration from Pizza Tower itself, I present to you my final evaluation. I'm just so impressed.